They say the veil between worlds is thin, that if you look at just the right moment, out of the corner of your eye, you'll see it. A flicker. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A face in the window that isn't a reflection. Most people dismiss it. A trick of the light. A figment of an overtired imagination. But you know better, don't you? That's why you're here. You've felt it. That cold spot in the hallway. That whisper on the wind that sounds like your name. That gut-wrenching certainty that you are not alone. The stories you're about to hear are not just stories. They are echoes of moments when that veil tore open just for a second and something looked through. These are the experiences people whisper about in hushed tones, long after the sun has gone down. So turn down the lights, settle in, and listen. Because the world is far stranger and much, much scarier than you can possibly imagine. This happened when I was about 14, visiting my aunt in a rural part of Mexico, near Oaxaca. Her house was beautiful but isolated, miles from the nearest town, set against the base of a mountain. Her husband was well off, a rancher with acres of land for his horses and cattle. The first few days were idyllic. But then, small things started to go wrong. I left my watch on a shelf outside the bathroom, and when I came back, it was gone. I searched everywhere, blaming my siblings, but they were sound asleep. Annoyed, I yelled into the empty hallway, "Whoever took my watch, I'm not playing around, give it back!" I went to put my shoes on, and from the living room, I heard the faint, tinny beeping of my watch alarm. I peeked around the corner. The blue backlight was glowing in the center of the hallway floor. A cold dread washed over me as I picked it up. When I mentioned it to my aunt, she just nodded grimly. "Don't leave valuables out," she warned. "The duendes will take them." I let out an uncomfortable laugh, but she wasn't joking. She told me the little people, the elves, like to hide things. I thought she was crazy. Later, I asked my mom about it, and the concerned look on her face told me everything. She didn't answer directly, just said, "If you feel scared, you should pray." That night, I fell asleep on the living room couch and woke up to a loud thud from the kitchen. It was followed by the sound of light, rapid footsteps like a cat scrambling on a tile floor. A light flicked on, and my aunt ran past me towards the kitchen, muttering, "Malditos duendes! Damn elves!" I peeked in after her. The kitchen was a disaster. Sacks of flour and sugar were overturned, jars knocked from shelves. "A raccoon must have gotten in," I suggested. She was furious, sweeping up the mess. "It was the duendes," she snapped. I rolled my eyes and helped her clean. As I was crouched down with the dustpan, holding it for her, I saw them. In a pile of spilled sugar on the dark floor, there were tiny, perfect footprints. They weren't from a raccoon or a cat. They were smaller than a baby's, but distinctly humanoid, like a lizard with human feet. My aunt saw me staring. "I know," she whispered. "I told you." I didn't sleep much after that, and every creak of the old house sent a shiver down my spine. The last night I woke for no reason, with that heavy feeling of being watched. I heard the pattering footsteps again, running right in front of my bed in the pitch darkness. I shot up, my heart hammering, and saw a small, waddling shadow, no more than a foot tall, dart across the room and disappear. It moved with an unnatural speed. I lunged for the light switch, flooding the room with light. Nothing was there. I used to be a skeptic, but after that week, I understood that some legends are rooted in a terrifying reality. If you think a stranger in the woods is terrifying, wait until the threat is already inside your house, wearing your own face. My husband saw my doppelganger in our hallway last night. We live in an old farmhouse, the kind with a history you can feel in the walls, and we've had our share of unexplained noises and fleeting shadows. Investigators have been here, but we're still waiting for their report. Last night I was taking a bath. He came into the bathroom, washed his hands, and went to the laundry room down the hall. A minute later, I heard him call my name. I answered, but he didn't seem to hear me. He called my name again, this time with an edge of confusion in his voice. Then he burst back into the bathroom, his face pale as a sheet. "I swear I just saw you," he stammered. "You were in the hallway. You were naked." He said he saw what he thought was me standing by the linen closet. He called my name, and this thing turned its head toward him. He said its face was blank, like it didn't recognize him at all. Then it just took one step behind a structural column in the hall and vanished. Our son, who was in his room, came out at that moment and asked who he was talking to. My husband said my name, but our son insisted I hadn't been there. He made me get out of the tub and swear I hadn't left the bathroom. For the rest of the night, he was a wreck, making us announce ourselves every time we entered a room. He wouldn't be alone. It's one thing to hear a bump in the night. It's another thing entirely to see someone you love replaced by a hollow, silent copy. It makes you wonder, who are you really living with? See? That feeling of replacement, of something being wrong in your own home, isn't always a fleeting glimpse. 9 years ago, my mother had an experience that made her quit her job and never look back. She was an accountant, working a late shift to close out the quarter. Around 11:30 at night, she went to the break room for a coffee. As she walked down the empty, silent corridor, she saw a woman who looked exactly like her walk past the far end of the hall and turn a corner. She froze, thinking her mind was playing tricks on her. Shaken, she made her coffee and headed back to her desk. But as she reached the doorway to her office area, she saw it again. The doppelganger was standing right there by her computer, its back to her, just looking at the screen. My mother was paralyzed with terror. It just stood there, perfectly still. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would burst. Just then, the night security guard came by on his final rounds. He saw my mom frozen in the doorway and put a hand on her shoulder, which made her jump. "You all right, miss?" he asked, and then he saw it too. His eyes widened as he looked past her at the figure by the computer. He didn't act surprised, just grimly understanding. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and firm. He escorted her out of the building, not saying another word until they were outside under the streetlights. "You need to find a new place to work," he told her. "What you saw, it's a very bad omen." She took his advice. She quit the next day and found a new job 2 weeks later. She never saw her double again, but the memory of that silent, watching figure in her office haunts her to this day. Sometimes, the entity isn't a copy, but something else entirely, something that has been waiting for you. 4 years ago, my family lived on a farm that was for sale. We were essentially caretakers, living in a small wooden storage house on the property while the main house remained locked. From the moment we arrived, I felt a deep, gnawing unease, the constant sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. The layout was strange, a gate, an open field, and then our little cabin. To the left stood the main house, and beyond that, the deep, dark woods. Right at the entrance to the forest, a single tree stood marked with a tattered plastic bag tied to a branch, a local custom to mark a spot of significance. In front of that tree was a mound of earth. Someone had buried something there. My room in the cabin was the only one without a lock. The first night, the feeling of being spied on was so intense I couldn't sleep. The door began to open on its own at night, first just a crack, then more frequently, more violently. I told myself it was the wind. Then I saw it. Standing in my doorway was a tall, black humanoid figure. Its face was a stark, smooth white, like a mask, with empty black sockets for eyes and a gaping, silent cavity for a mouth. It just stood there, staring. I was too terrified to move, to scream. I just stared back, trying to will it away, telling myself it was a hallucination. But a few nights later, it started to move. It would enter my room, a creeping shadow in the dark. It would tap on the metal window right beside my bed. It would shift small objects on my dresser. I started sleeping with a flashlight. Shining the beam on it would make it vanish instantly, but the oppressive feeling remained thicker than before. I was exhausted, falling asleep at school, and I started waking up with splitting headaches, a bizarre sensation of pressure behind my eyes as if they'd been pushed into my skull. Then my aunt came to visit. She was a superstitious woman and declared there was gold buried on the property. Her eyes landed on the mound in front of the marked tree. She insisted we dig. It was a terrible idea. As I dug, I felt the shovel hit something different from the usual rocks and roots. After a layer of fragmented stones, I struck something soft yet resistant, with a texture like old leather. I pushed harder, breaking through it. Immediately, my shovel hit something hard, with a complex, detailed shape. It was large and occupied most of the hole, making it impossible to dig around. My aunt, frustrated, told us to just cover the hole back up, but she left before we did. That night was hell. The tapping on my window was replaced by violent banging. The creature was relentless, entering my room over and over. My flashlight wouldn't work. I had to lie there in the dark, awake, feeling this immense pressure on all sides as it just stood there, staring. The security cameras my parents had installed all failed that night, all except one. The footage for the 3 cameras covering the house was pure static, but the one pointed at the forest entrance showed a small, fleeting blur. After that night, the figure never appeared again. We moved away soon after, but I'll never forget the feeling of digging in that hole, of breaking through that leathery surface and hitting whatever was buried beneath. We didn't find gold. I think we disturbed a grave, and whatever we woke up, it wanted us gone. Children are closer to that veil, I think. They haven't yet learned to build the walls of disbelief that we adults hide behind. They see things. My daughter, when she was 4, pointed to a picture of my grandmother on my nightstand. "That's your granny, Barbara," she said. I smiled and told her she was right, asking who had told her that. Her answer chilled me to the bone. "She told me," my daughter said matter-of-factly, "when I was in your tummy." Another time, my son, who was just 3, was pointing to an empty corner of his bedroom. He came running out to the living room, not scared, but insistent. "There's a man in the corner of my room," he said. I followed him back in, expecting to see a shadow from a tree branch. He pointed directly into the empty corner and described a man in perfect detail, what he was wearing, the color of his hair, the sad look on his face. He did this several times over the weeks we were staying at my friend's house on an old military base, a place dotted with forgotten family shrines. He's a teenager now and doesn't remember a thing, but I will never forget the chilling certainty in his voice. These aren't just invisible friends. Sometimes they're memories. My son used to tell me in terrifying detail about how he and his sister died in a basement with a different mommy and daddy. He has 2 sisters now, so I'd ask which one. He'd always say, no, a different sister. Her name was Clara. He would describe their dad locking them in the basement, the sound of gunshots upstairs, and then the fire. He'd talk about it getting so hot he couldn't breathe, the smoke filling his lungs, and then falling asleep. He was only 4 when he told me this, with a consistency that was horrifying. He doesn't talk about it anymore. Maybe it's better that he doesn't remember, and sometimes what they see isn't a memory, but a warning. I was babysitting my 7-year-old cousin when she showed me a drawing. It was a picture of her friend, a girl named Ellie. In the drawing, Ellie had a long braid of hair wrapped around her own neck and looping through her eye sockets. The end of the braid was pulling me, the stick figure version of me, into a closet. I asked her why she drew such a scary picture. She looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears. "Ellie thinks you're mean," she whispered. "She told me she wants to hurt you." I almost started crying myself. I don't know who Ellie is or was, but I made sure to stay far away from the closets in that house for the rest of the night. If the threat isn't a spirit or a memory, what happens when it's a living thing that shouldn't exist? On an autumn day, I was hiking on a hill in the forest behind my house. The air was still, not a breath of wind. That's when I saw it. A small creature, maybe 3 feet tall, wearing a dark cloak with a collar that looked like it was woven from fallen leaves. Its head was the skull of a large bird. It hadn't seen me yet. It was just standing there, and then it turned its head. I don't think it meant for me to see it, because the moment our eyes met, it bolted, running with a frantic energy. As it ran, the dead leaves on the forest floor swirled violently around its feet, even though the air around me was perfectly calm. It was gone in seconds. Curiosity got the better of me, and I went back the next day. I didn't see the little creature. Instead, standing in the same spot was something huge. I couldn't make out its shape clearly through the trees, but it was massive, and the feeling coming off it was not curiosity, but pure territorial warning. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned around, went home, and I have avoided that part of the woods ever since. Sometimes these things don't stay in the woods. They come into our homes. For a while, I kept seeing these little people like a strange mix between a human and a rodent. They weren't hostile, just grumpy. They would walk through my house as if they owned the place. I believe they might have been brownies or some other kind of house spirit. I saw them so often I almost got used to them. It's strange the things you can get used to when the veil is thin where you live. But a doll is different. It's an invitation. When I was a kid, I collected porcelain dolls. I had hundreds. A few were active. One would knock another doll out of a tiny chair until I finally put her in it. Another, a very old one, felt like a guardian. I always felt safer with her in my room. But then there was him. My stepmom found him new in the store, a boy magician doll. Porcelain boys are rare, so she snagged him for me. He came with a little stool, a top hat, a starry cape, and a wand tied to his hand. He was brand new, fresh from the box. I put him on a shelf near the foot of my bed, facing out into the room. That night, the nightmares started. They were different from my usual bad dreams, dark, malicious, and deeply unsettling. When I woke up, the doll seemed to be facing my bed more than when I had placed him. I told myself I was imagining it. But the nightmares got worse each night. I'd wake up terrified, with a palpable feeling of a malevolent presence staring at me from the doorway. I just knew it was the magician boy. The air around his shelf felt cold and wrong. Finally, I told my stepmom I couldn't have him in my room anymore. She didn't disbelieve me, but thought I was overreacting. She took him for her own collection and put him on a shelf in her room. That night, my little stepbrother, who was about 4 and shared the bed with her, woke her up in the middle of the night. He was pointing a trembling finger towards the shelf where the doll sat. "Mama," he whispered, his voice shaky. "Who's that?" "I don't like him." The next day, the doll was packed away in the attic. A few days later, it was sold online. The nightmares stopped. The scary man in the doorway was never seen again. Good luck to whoever bought him. Not all haunted objects are so obviously sinister at first. I received a beautiful antique baby doll from an online seller. Something about her picture called to me. I knew from the moment I unboxed her that she was different from my other collectibles. I'm a paranormal enthusiast, so I have EMF meters. I conducted a few tests, keeping my phone and all other electronics in another room. I received intelligent responses, spikes on the meter that corresponded directly to my questions. The spirit box was even more active, with whispers and faint words forming in the static. She has no batteries, nothing that could give off a faulty reading. I keep looking for a logical explanation, but the more time I spend with her, the more I'm convinced she isn't just a doll. There's a paranormal attachment here, a story I haven't yet uncovered. The most terrifying things often happen when you're most vulnerable, far from the safety of home. Camping trips seem to be a magnet for the strange and unexplainable. A few years ago, my friends and I were camping in a remote area in Flagstaff. After a day of hiking, we settled in for the night. I woke up in the dead of night to a shape pressing against the side of our tent, a deep, dark figure burying itself into the fabric. It hovered back and forth over my body. My dog, curled at my feet, was awake but completely still, not making a sound. My friend was fast asleep. I was utterly alone with this thing. I eventually threw the sleeping bag over my head and prayed for sleep. The next morning, we found no tracks, no sign of any animal. Our food left out on the table was untouched. A bear would have gone for the food. This thing, it was only interested in us. The next night, we moved to a different campsite. As we were hiking down by a creek, a huge rock was thrown into the water near us, creating a massive splash. We looked up at the cliff above, but there was no one there. We yelled out, but heard no one running away. My friend then confessed that small pebbles had been thrown at him throughout the trip, but he'd dismissed it. It felt like we were being followed, toyed with. That night, back at the new campsite, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. We built a fire, hoping to keep whatever it was at bay. As darkness fell, we heard it. The rustle of leaves, the crunch of footsteps just beyond the ring of firelight. Then from the darkness, a low, guttural growl that wasn't from any animal I recognized. We abandoned everything, scrambled into the car, and locked the doors. We didn't stop driving until we hit the main highway. The wilderness has secrets, and sometimes it doesn't want to share them. My stepdad's hunting cabin in Pennsylvania is another place where the veil is thin. It's deep in the woods, no cell service, no streetlights. We were there one weekend cleaning it out. After dinner, we had a bonfire. As the fire died down, the woods became dead quiet. No crickets, no rustling leaves, nothing. My mom stepped outside for a smoke. A moment later, we heard her yell, a sharp cry of pain and surprise. She came limping back inside. "Someone threw a rock at me," she said, her voice shaking. My stepdad immediately grabbed his rifle and ran outside. He circled the cabin, firing a few warning shots into the backstop. We never saw anyone. We never heard anyone run off. Who would be lurking deep in a pitch-black forest, miles from anywhere, just to throw a single rock? We joke about Bigfoot now, but standing there in that silent, oppressive darkness, it felt far more sinister than any folklore. Sometimes the experience is less about fear and more about sheer, baffling impossibility. My family and I were camping on a cliff overlooking the ocean. One day, we all started hearing this bizarre, guttural howling noise coming from the cliffs below. It was a mixture of a mechanical grinding and some giant creature roaring in agony. As we walked closer to the cliff edge, the sound got louder and louder until it was a deafening roar that made the ground feel like it was vibrating. We could barely hear each other shouting. We got spooked and ran back to our campsite, but the sound didn't fade with distance. It stayed at that same deafening volume. But here's the strangest part. No one else could hear it. We watched the other campers around us. They were going about their day, talking, laughing, completely oblivious to the world-ending sound that was shaking us to our core. We were the only ones who could hear it. Was it a shared delusion? A localized phenomenon? I still have no explanation for the day we stood on that cliff listening to something impossible. The woods don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper. A couple of friends and I were staying at my family's cabin for a week. The first night, one of my friends went for a run and came sprinting back, pale and terrified, swearing he saw a tall, black figure moving between the trees alongside him. A few nights later, we were in the hot tub telling scary stories. Another friend with tears in his eyes began describing how, as a child, he would see a tall, black figure standing in his room at night. As he was telling this story, I heard distinct footsteps in the woods just below us, but I kept it to myself, not wanting to scare them further. On the last day, things escalated. A towel kept falling off a hook it was securely hung on. A blanket folded on a bed was found spread neatly on the floor. Bathroom cabinets opened on their own. Around 4 a.m., we finally tried to get some sleep. Just as I was drifting off, my friend whispered from the floor, "Can you hear that rustling in the kitchen?" The three of us crept out into the living room. I turned on my phone's flashlight and my stomach dropped. The cushions from the couch and chairs had been removed and stood perfectly upright on the floor, like little monoliths. The decorative animal pelts had been thrown in a pile in the center of the room. We were so freaked out, we got everyone out of the cabin and spent the rest of the night huddled in our cars, waiting for the sun to rise. We weren't on drugs, we weren't drunk. Something was in that cabin with us, playing some kind of bizarre, silent game, and then there's the truly inexplicable. My 2-year-old son woke up crying at 3 in the morning. I brought him into our bed. After a few minutes, he sat bolt upright, pointed a tiny finger at the darkest corner of our room, and said, clear as day, "Ta-da, guy, die!" My wife and I just looked at each other, our blood running cold. We bought our house from an elderly woman whose husband had passed away inside it some years before. We just pretended it never happened. What else can you do? The final story for tonight is about a promise. In 2001, just days after my mother brought my newborn brother home, my dad was working a night shift. I, being 7, was sleeping in my parents' bed with my mom. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, we both woke up at the same time with a jolt, looking at each other in confusion. My baby brother was still fast asleep in his cot next to the bed. The room was silent. Then, a loud whooshing noise filled the room and a strong breeze swept over us. The whooshing sound came again, this time closer, right over my brother's cot. It sounded exactly like massive wings flapping. My mom leaped out of bed thinking a bird had somehow gotten in. But the window was closed and locked. The lights went on. My brother was awake now, not crying, just looking around with wide, curious eyes. As the shock faded, my mom later told me she heard a voice, clear and calm, say, "It's okay." At that moment, she thought it was me trying to reassure her. But then she realized it didn't sound like my voice at all. I heard it too. It was the most genuinely reassuring voice I have ever heard. We felt the winged thing arrive, but we never felt or heard it leave. The initial fear was replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace and relief. It's hard to describe. When my dad came home, he was worried by our story. But my mom just smiled and told him, "It's okay. He has nothing to worry about. I have a good feeling about this." I don't know what visited my brother's room that night. An angel? A guardian? Whatever it was, it left us not with fear, but with the strange, comforting certainty that he was being watched over. The world is full of these moments, these brief glimpses through the curtain. Whether it's the mischievous games of an ancient elf, the chilling appearance of a doppelganger, or the heavy footsteps of something unknown circling your tent in the dead of night. These stories remind us that we don't have all the answers, They remind us to listen to that primal instinct, that whisper of warning in the back of our minds. What have you seen in the shadows? What have you heard in the silence? Share your own experiences in the comments below. If these stories resonated with that part of you that knows there's more to this world than what we can see, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more journeys into the unexplained. Stay vigilant, and remember, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there watching.